The morning sun cast long shadows across the wooden floor of the ranch kitchen, as Sarah May wiped her hands on her mother's old apron. The familiar weight of the heavy cast-iron skillet felt foreign in her 17-year-old hands, yet she knew every dent and scratch on its surface. For 3 weeks now, since her mother Emma had taken to her bed with the fever that wouldn't break, Sarah May had been learning the rhythms of feeding 40 hungry ranch hands. The kitchen still held traces of her mother's presence. The smell of cinnamon and coffee seemed permanently woven into the log walls. Dried herbs hung from the exposed beams overhead, casting dancing shadows in the early light. But now, instead of her mother's confident movements around the wood-burning stove, there was only Sarah May's careful, uncertain steps. She had grown up in this kitchen, watching her mother work magic with simple ingredients. Emma could stretch a side of beef to feed the crew for days, turn yesterday's bread into something special, and somehow always have hot coffee ready when the men came in from the cold morning rides. Sarah May had helped, of course, peeling potatoes and stirring pots, but she had never been solely responsible for keeping the men fed and happy. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like the heavy wooden yoke her father used to carry water buckets. 40 men depended on her now. 40 men who worked hard from dawn until dusk, who needed filling meals to keep their strength up for the demanding work of running cattle across the vast Montana range. Mr. Jameson, the ranch owner, had been patient at first. He was a weathered man in his 50s, with kind but tired eyes that seemed to carry the burden of keeping the entire operation running. When Emma first fell ill, he had told Sarah May not to worry, that they would manage somehow. But as the days stretched into weeks and Emma's condition remained unchanged, Sarah May could see the concern growing in his expression. Yesterday, he had pulled her aside after the evening meal. His voice was gentle, but his words cut deep. "Sarah May," he had said, removing his worn hat and turning it in his hands, "you're doing your best, and I appreciate that. But the men are starting to grumble. 3 times this week the biscuits were burnt, and yesterday's stew was thin enough to see through. I know you're young, and this isn't your fault, but—" He had paused, looking out toward the bunkhouse where yellow light spilled from the windows. "I've got a ranch to run, and men to keep fed. If things don't improve soon, I'm going to have to make some changes. Maybe send for a cook from town." Sarah May knew what that meant. Her mother's job would be gone. The little house behind the kitchen that had been their home for 8 years would no longer be theirs. And with Emma too sick to work anywhere else, they would have nowhere to go. That night, Sarah May had sat by her mother's bedside, holding her thin hand and listening to her labored breathing. Emma's fever had finally broken 2 days ago, but she was still weak, sleeping most of the time. In her few waking moments, she would look at Sarah May with worried eyes. "The cooking, sweet girl," Emma had whispered yesterday. "Are you managing?" Sarah May had forced a smile and nodded, not wanting to add to her mother's worries, but inside her heart was breaking. She was failing, and she knew it. Now, as she prepared breakfast for what might be her last day in the kitchen, Sarah May moved with quiet determination. She had spent the night thinking, remembering every lesson her mother had tried to teach her. Not just the recipes, but the little touches that made the difference. The way Emma would hum while she cooked, the care she took in presenting even simple food, the genuine warmth she showed the men who came to her table. Sarah May started with the coffee, grinding the beans by hand and adding just a pinch of salt, the way her mother had shown her. She mixed the biscuit dough carefully, handling it just enough to bring it together, then rolled it out on the floured wooden board. As she cut the biscuits, she found herself humming one of her mother's old songs. The bacon sizzled in one of the large skillets, while she cracked eggs into another. She had learned to crack them one-handed now, the way her mother did, never breaking a yolk. The rhythm of the kitchen was becoming more natural, her movements more confident, but it was when she started on the hash browns that something changed. Instead of just cubbing the potatoes as she had been doing, she remembered watching her mother grate them by hand, squeezing out the excess moisture, seasoning them with more than just salt and pepper. She added a touch of onion powder, some paprika, and a secret ingredient her mother had shown her once, a small spoonful of bacon grease for flavor. As the potatoes cooked, turning golden and crispy, the kitchen filled with an aroma that reminded her of her mother's best mornings. Sarah May felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the heat from the stove. When the men filed in for breakfast, Sarah May served them with the same quiet grace she had watched her mother display thousands of times. She kept the coffee cups filled, brought extra biscuits without being asked, and made sure every plate was abundant. She didn't notice Mr. Jameson watching her carefully as the men ate. She didn't see him observing the way the cowboys cleaned their plates or hear the satisfied murmurs of appreciation. She was too focused on making sure everything was perfect. It wasn't until after the last man had left for his morning chores that Mr. Jameson approached her. Sarah May braced herself, expecting the worst. Instead, he smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in weeks. "Sarah May," he said, "I don't know what you did different this morning, but that was the best breakfast we've had since your mother took ill." The men were actually talking about how good the hash browns were, and I haven't seen Jake clean his plate like that in months. Sarah May felt tears prick her eyes. "Mr. Jameson, he held up a hand. "I owe you an apology, girl. I was so worried about keeping things running that I forgot you're just learning. Your mother didn't become the best cook in 3 counties overnight. She earned that reputation over years of practice." He paused, looking around the kitchen that was already clean and ready for the next meal. "What I'm trying to say is, the job is yours for as long as you want it. Take your time learning. We'll make do, and I believe you're going to be just fine." That evening, Sarah May sat by her mother's bedside again. But this time, Emma was awake and alert, her color better than it had been in weeks. "I could smell breakfast cooking this morning," Emma said with a weak smile. "It smelled like home." Sarah May squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm learning, Mama. Slowly, but I'm learning. That's all any of us can do, sweet girl. Learn and keep trying." Outside the window, the sun was setting over the Montana range, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Tomorrow would bring another day, another chance to feed the men who worked this land. And Sarah May knew now that she could do it. She was her mother's daughter, after all.